Good morning, wildlife. How you guys doing? You guys good? Awake? Hey, some of you got close to that impossible shot. That was actually pretty impressive. I think like one day someone will get it, obviously, and then we might have to get something like even more epic of a prize, like a $51 gift card or something, um, or like a high five from Cody, which honestly is worth more than diamonds. Well, hey, if we haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Johnny, and I'm on staff here in Wildlife. And if it's your first time joining us, which I do see some new faces, or if you've been gone for a while, or if this is your millionth time, we are so glad that you guys are joining us on this Sunday morning. Part of my job is really what I believe is the best job on earth, which is to hang out with you guys, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So if we haven't had the chance to meet, I would love to give you a high five or like a solid handshake afterwards, and I would love just to get to know, your name, what school you go to, and then like, do you like pumpkin spice lattes or not? Anyone pumpkin spice lattes or anything pumpkin spice? One thing I would love to see is like a pumpkin spice, like red vines. I feel like that's a thing. No, is it a thing? Should it be a thing? This room, this side of the room, yeah? No, all right. Cool. Wow, you guys are very passionate about that. Hey, well, as we jump into this time, if it's your first time joining us, what we're about to do is we're about to go into what we call a time of teaching, which is the most important time of the service. We love to play crazy games, give out fun prizes, play games dealing with pumpkin spice, apparently not red vines. We love to do all that kind of stuff, but this is really the most important time of the morning. It's an opportunity for us as Wildlife, as 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and even as staff in this room to go before Jesus and read and open up his Bible to learn something hopefully new about who he is and what he has called us to do. So, a couple ways to win in this time. This is not a time to be a distraction to the people around you. This is not an opportunity to be on your phone to finally, maybe get that Snapchat streak going. Or anything like that. This is an opportunity for us to really focus. So if a staff member, someone with a badge like this comes over to you and they tell you to either quiet down or they ask you to get off your phone because you're on maybe something that's not the Bible app or anything like that, or if they even move your seat, it's not because we hate you. It's because we really want you to pay attention and focus in this time. So a way to win in this time is that, and also there's a message note sheet that you should have seen in front of your table as you guys came in. There's some fill in the blanks on the front and the back. This is not a test. It's not a quiz. We're not going to see it. This is an opportunity for you to hopefully remember something that maybe you've never learned before. And I know like your parents are going to ask you probably, hey, what did you learn at Wildlife or what happened? And 99% of the time, because I was like this in middle school, is your response is, I don't know. And your parents are like, really? You didn't learn anything? I don't know. Like something about Jesus. Someone was shooting a bow and arrow. Like, I don't know what happened. But that's a great way. That message note sheet, anything that sticks out to you, the fill in the blanks on there, you can just read one thing and your parents can go, oh, okay, you paid attention. You're like, I think I did. Or it's also an opportunity too, if you are someone that likes to draw, you can also utilize that as like a drawing tool as well. Because I have a friend that he just draws sometimes during like a message when he's listening to, and he's still retaining everything, but then he ends up like drawing like a picture of like Pastor Michael or something like that. It's actually pretty impressive. So I'm gonna go ahead and pray, and as we jump into this time, let's really focus up. So again, if you know you get distracted by one of your friends next to you, let's try to really hone in on that, and let's try to like get away from that distraction. Let's go ahead and pray. All right. Jesus, thank you so much that we have an opportunity right now to come before you, that us as Wildlife, as part of your church, part of your body, that you invite us into something epic. But Jesus, there's certain things in our lives that kind of stop us from really experiencing how awesome and how epic you are. So as we go into this time, Jesus, would you help us with any distraction, whether it's a test coming up, whether it's something going on at home, whether it's drama, or honestly, if we're just really tired this morning, would you help us? Would you help us to focus so that we can really pay attention to what you have in store for us? And it's in your name, we all said, amen. So wildlife, as you know, this is October. This is the month of, again, of pumpkin spice lattes. It's the month of Halloween. It's the month of, like I said last week, my mom's birthday. Happy birthday, Barbara. It's a great month for so many different things. I know when I was a kid going into Halloween, I was always excited to be Spider-Man for the third year in a row. When I was a little kid, I used to. This is embarrassing, but when I was a little kid, like 5, there was like a Halloween party at one of my parents' like old church, and I went as Clark Kent, right? You know, Clark Kent with the guy with the glasses, kind of nerdy, kind of hunched over. Halfway through the party, I thought, apparently this was my idea. I thought it'd be awesome to leave the party and then return as Superman. And I thought that was so cool. Looking back now, I was like, wow, that is really embarrassing. I had like the slick back hair, but this month is all about Halloween, all that kind of stuff. But also with this month, this is tend to be kind of the month of when like scary, spooky movies come out, or like when Stranger Things has like the newest season. Let's be honest, Stranger Things, it's it's done, right? Is it done? One more thing. Okay, well, let's be honest. It should be done. It should have been done like 3 years ago. But this is that month, which reminds me is that have you ever seen like old school like monster scary movies like black and white? Like the CGI is actually not even there. It's like all practical effects, and they're really poorly done into like today's standards. Which actually, I mean, some of them do look better than like some of the like Marvel movies lately. But it reminded me of this one movie. It's called The Wolf Man. Has anyone like ever heard of The Wolf Man? It's basically this guy. There's a full moon. He turns into a wolf. End of movie. Like that's basically the premise of the movie. But what I love about the old school type of monster movies is one, they're in black and white. The acting's always over the top, and there's always like a little bit of cheesiness to it. I'm gonna show you guys a quick clip of this movie. Let's take a look. Isn't that good? Wow. Well, yeah, and that's what he ends up looking like. But I love that he kind of started to like tiptoe away. But anyway, the reason I share that is that the Wolf Man is supposed to be a very scary guy. To be honest, that just looks like someone that just took like too many like hair growing pills or something like that. But the Wolfman, when the moon comes out, he becomes this Wolfman, this big monster, scary monster that just wants to like hunt people down. And the reason I share all that is that because the Wolfman, when he becomes this monster, he becomes very, very angry. And the circumstances that causes him to change into this monster is his circumstances change because the moon comes out and he becomes a wolf man, which is really like, look at that. That is some makeup on that guy. But the reason I share that is this morning we are starting a brand new series called The Monster Within. And in this series, we're going to be looking at different monsters in our lives that are not of Jesus. Basically, these are not characteristics of who Jesus is. And the reason we're diving into this series is one, the monster within. It's the Halloween month, but also there's monsters in our lives that we don't even recognize as monsters. I'm sure so many of us can realize that maybe you do get angry sometimes, because I know I get angry a lot of the times. But we're going to be looking at this monster of anger, specifically, what does the Bible say about anger? And I'm excited because this series, we're going to be looking at multiple different monsters in our lives that maybe some of us don't even recognize as a monster. And some of those are, we're going to be looking at the monster of lust. We're going to be looking at the monster of gossip, jealousy, lying. And this morning, we're going to be, again, looking at the monster of anger. And this monster of anger is not always a bad thing. So your first fill-in, 2 truths about anger. The first one is this: anger is not always a bad thing. anger is not always a bad thing. For example, there's a couple of things that are maybe it's good to have anger. For example, when you see a good friend or someone at school that maybe is just getting bullied and you get very angry because you know, hey, bullying is wrong, people should not pick on someone else, that is a good thing to get angry about. Now, depending on how you then deal with that anger, it is a bad thing to walk up to someone and just punch them in the face. That's a bad way to react when you have anger, right? You should go grab a teacher or a parent or something like that. But anger is not always a bad thing. Other things that are good to get angry about, in my opinion, is like, hey, if you fail a test that you really, really studied for, and you get really angry and mad at yourself, oh, I know I can do better. That should be motivation that you then try harder and study more for the next test. Another good thing to get angry about is just evil. Evil in the world, seeing bad things are happening to so many different people. You know, there's a hurricane that has gone through Florida. Hey, that is a thing that maybe we should get angry about. Like, that is a terrible thing. But then that anger should then result in, hey, how can we help those people out? But then there's also things that are not good to get angry about, especially with how we react to something. For example, I don't have a brother or sister, so I can't relate entirely, but I'm sure this would be annoying that if you had a younger brother or sister come into your room and you just get really angry and maybe you just want to like clock them in the face. That is not a good thing to get angry about. And a reminder is one, hey, they live there too. All right. They also live in that house. But these are good things and bad things to get angry about. But the first point before we kind of dive in is that, hey, anger is not always a bad thing, which leads to our second truth is that anger is a warning sign to help you, hey, pay attention. Anger is a warning sign to help you pay attention. Is that as we're going to look at one verse in the Bible that's going to kind of give us a whole underlying theme of what anger is, especially in the Bible, is that we're going to see that anger is God given energy for us to then solve certain problems and issues in our lives. Like, for example, again, if you see someone getting bullied at school and that doesn't upset you, I would then wonder, hey, why doesn't that upset you? Maybe do you think, hey, they deserved it? Or maybe you're like, I don't even know that person. Why would I get angry? No, like an example of bullying is something that shouldn't ever happen. And when we see it, we should kind of get angry and upset and then go and tell a teacher to do something about it. Another question is that, hey, with anger being a warning sign for us to, hey, you should be paying attention, we should then ask the question, hey, why am I angry about this one thing? Or, hey, is this a good thing to get angry about? Because a quick definition of anger that we're going to kind of roll with is this, is that anger is a warning sign that God has given us to help us solve issues in our lives. So anger is not always a bad thing, but it's a warning sign for us to, hey, pay attention to whatever is going on. And what we're going to see is that actually God gets angry. You ever thought about that? Actually, God does get angry. There are times and times, especially in the Old Testament, the first half of our Bibles, of God getting angry. But what we're going to see in a couple of minutes is we're going to see a difference between God's anger and then our anger. So if you guys have your Bibles, we're going to open up to the book of Exodus, which is the second book in the Bible in the Old Testament. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 34, and we're going to be starting at verse 6. Now, if you have an old school Bible like me, paperback, kind of smells like leather, but it's not. There is a great tool in our Bibles called the table of contents, which gives us a way to find certain books in the Bible. And if you're one of those people who are like, man, I don't even know where the book of Exodus is, there's a book called Lamentations. What is that about? It's okay to go to the table of contents. It's in the first couple pages of every Bible, and it'll just show you exactly what page number a certain book of the Bible is on. For example, in my Bible, Exodus starts on page 48. So I would open up to 48, and then I would go and find chapter 34, and then I would jump down to verse 6. So as we read, we're just going to read one verse, and as we read this, I want us to understand that this verse is part of other verses, but we only have time for this one verse, but Moses is revealing to us part of who God is. That if you were to ask someone, especially in like thousands of years ago when the Old Testament was, new, we would have many people go to this one verse and this one passage to understand more of who God is, specifically whose God's character is like. And remember, a couple of series ago, series I don't know. We remember that character is what makes you you. So as we read this verse, we're going to see who God is based off of this. So Exodus chapter 34. Hey, by the way, if you're there, can I just get a thumbs up from you if you're there? And if you're lost, just look to the person next to you, all right? Not in a weird way. Just ask, hey, can I look over your shoulder? Make sure your breath doesn't smell. All right, verse 6, chapter 34, it says this. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. So if you have a pen near you or a crayon or a highlighter or something like that, underline that phrase, slow to anger. Because we're going to be focusing in on this one phrase, slow to anger, that God is slow to anger, which tells us, hey, God gets angry. But God gets angry about good things, which we're going to talk about later on. But we're going to be focusing on this fact that God is slow to anger, that when God gets angry, and he does, he is very slow. He's very patient with his anger. And what's funny, if you were to look at the original language that this was written in, which was Hebrew, if you don't know, the Bible wasn't written in English. It was written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Very fancy. This phrase actually means something different in the original language. It actually means long of nose. Serious. It means that long of nose is another way of saying slow to anger. Now, I'm not going to help us illustrate what this looks like. I'm actually going to let the Bible Project help us understand what this means. If you guys don't know what the Bible Project is, it is an amazing organization that helps people like me and you understand big, weird terms, what the Bible talks about, in a way that's very simple to understand. They do great ways of illustration with like some cartoon stuff. It's actually really cool. So we're going to look at what it means that God is slow to anger. Let's go ahead and check this out.
If you tried to describe what God is like, it could be difficult or daunting. But when the people who wrote the Bible pondered the mystery of God, they consistently describe God's character in this way: compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness. We're going to look at this third phrase, that God is slow to anger. Now, that might surprise some people. Isn't the God of the Bible mostly angry, striking people down for their sins? Well, it turns out that God's anger in the Bible is way more nuanced than that, and way more interesting. In Hebrew, the phrase slow to anger is pronounced erek apayim, or literally long of nose. But what does God's patience have to do with a long nose? Well, first, we need to look at the common biblical Hebrew way to say that someone is angry. Their nose burned hot. Like in the story of Joseph, when Potiphar thinks that Joseph tried to sleep with his wife, his nose burned hot. It's usually translated, his anger burned. It's describing how your body, especially your face, gets hot when you're filled with anger. And so in Hebrew, the main words for anger are either nose or heat or hot nose. This is why a patient person is called long of nose. It takes a long time for their nose to get hot. Like in the biblical proverb, a person's wisdom is their long nose. That is, their slow anger. Now, in the Bible, God gets angry numerous times, but God doesn't have a nose or get hot. These are metaphors, using our experience of hot anger to describe how God feels when he witnesses human evil. Just like you would get angry if you saw a child being bullied on the playground, so God gets angry when humans oppress each other and ruin his world. In the Bible, God's anger is an expression of his justice and his love for the world. But he's slow to anger, which means he gives people lots of time to change. Like in the story of the Exodus, when Pharaoh enslaves the Israelites and has their baby boys thrown into the waters, God sends Moses to confront Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's given 10 chances to let Israel go free, but after the 10th refusal, Pharaoh rides out with his chariots to destroy the Israelites, and so God destroys him in the waters. Pharaoh's own evil is turned back upon him, and we read that this is an act of God's hot anger. Now, that's really intense, but think about it. God wouldn't be good if he didn't get angry at Pharaoh's evil and eventually do something about it. And notice that God's anger is expressed by handing Pharaoh over to the consequences of his own decisions. And this is actually how God's anger is shown throughout the scriptures, like in the story of the Israelites. Over and over again, for hundreds of years, they betray the God who rescued them from slavery. And though he gives them many chances to turn around, they keep giving their allegiance to the gods of other nations. And each time we read that the hot anger of God burned against the Israelites. But notice what always follows. God gave them over into the hands of their enemies. Israel wanted to serve the gods of other nations, and so God, in his just anger, gives them what they want, as those nations circle back and defeat Israel. This is similar to what the Apostle Paul says in his letter to the Romans. He says God's anger is being revealed against human evil, and then 3 times he says what that looks like. God hands people over to their destructive desires and decisions, even if it leads to death. But Paul also says God is patient, giving people time to come to their senses and change. Because remember, God's anger is a response to human evil, and it's based on a deeper character trait, his compassion and his loyal love. God is not content to let people sit in their own self-destruction. In the Bible, God's on a mission to rescue. This is why Jesus said that he was going to Jerusalem to die, as a demonstration of God's love for his enemies. He would stand in the place of his people who were choosing self-destruction and take the consequences of their decisions upon himself. In Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, we see God's anger at evil and his love for people working together to provide forgiveness and life for a humanity lost in self-ruin. So God's anger in the Bible is really important, but it's not the end of the story. When God is angry and brings justice, it's because he's good, and he's extremely patient, working out his plan to restore people to his love. And that's what it means to say that God is slow to anger.
So that gives us like a pretty good illustration of like what does it mean that God is slow to anger, and it gives us a better understanding of like that God has a long nose, right? It's basically showing us that God in who He is, it takes a lot for Him to get angry, and it also gives us a better picture that He gives people a lot of time to change. That God is slow in His anger, which a big picture, kind of big takeaway from that video is your next fill-in. Is this is that God is patient in His anger. Another way of saying that is that God has a long nose. God is very patient in his anger. Again, in that story that the Bible Project talked about, when Moses goes to Pharaoh and he says, hey, let my people go. And Pharaoh 10 times says, no, I'm not going to do that. And then all these plagues happen. And then that is God giving Pharaoh a chance to change. And as we know, Pharaoh did not change. So then God, took him out and all of his armies. But God is patient in his anger. And since God is slow to anger, as followers of Jesus, as Christians, we should also be slow to anger as well, which is really easier said than done. And what I love in the book of James, written by Jesus's brother, he actually helps people understand, Christians understand, what it looks like to be slow to anger. So on the back of your note sheet, it says this in James chapter 1, verses 19 through 20. It says this: my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and then here's that phrase again, slow to become angry. And now you're probably wondering, hey, why should we be slow to become angry? Again, angry is not always a bad thing, but why should we be slow to anger? James says, because human anger, the way we do things, not the way God does things, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Every time I see the word righteous, I think of like a surfer dude, like righteous, or like a Crush from Finding Nemo. But what we are supposed to do as Christians, if you have given your life to Jesus, which means you say, hey, I follow Jesus, we are then to follow Jesus in every way. It says in that passage, hey, we should be quick to listen, slow to speak, which means we shouldn't be very quick to speak. We should be very patient and wait it out and then speak. But also we should be slow to become angry. And let's be honest, a lot of us can be angry. We can get angry about certain things. Again, maybe you do get angry that your brother or sister do come in your room without your permission and they just bug you. They annoy you and you just want to tell them to leave. As followers of Jesus, as Christians, we are supposed to be slow in our anger. It doesn't mean we don't ever get angry. Again, anger is an emotion. God has given us an emotion, but it's more wise in how we handle our anger, how we handle this emotion. And again, this verse says that God desires in us to pursue righteous anger. What does righteous anger mean? It means that, hey, for us to be in a relationship with Jesus, it means that we are in right relationship, which means we live out what he calls us to do. Rocky Peak has this phrase, we listen and follow what Jesus tells us to do, but we do it in a way that's very slow. We're slow to anger. We don't do it very quickly, right? When someone upsets you, whether it's at school, maybe you have a bully, and you have had it up to here with them making fun of you. So you just act out in anger very quickly without even thinking out the consequences. Hey, is this a good thing of how I'm going to handle this anger? Or are you going to be very slow and think it through? Again, slow to anger means to have a long nose. Another way of saying that, it takes a lot for you to get angry. I want you to think about it. How quick does it take for you to get angry? Whether it's a brother or sister, a friend, your parents, when your parents tell you to take out the trash, and you just get so frustrated because they don't understand that you can't pause a multiplayer game online, so you'll just do it afterwards. So you get angry and you get frustrated, and they ask you time and time again, how do you respond? Are you very quick and you just snap back at your parents? Do you say something that you're going to regret? Or are you very slow to your anger and then start to think, is this something that is good to get angry about? Does it take a long time for you to become angry? Does it take a long time for, like that video described, for your nose to get hot? Think of it kind of like a tea kettle. Does anyone drink tea? You should. It's awesome for your throat. It's amazing. Michael drinks it at like 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But like a tea kettle, when you put water in it and you want it to heat up, you're probably going to set the flames on high so it heats up faster. But if you want it to heat up slower, for whatever reason, you would probably put it on low. Now, it doesn't mean that the tea kettle is not going to make that whistling noise, but it's going to take a long time for it to become hot so that it becomes a whistling noise. In the same way, for us, how long does it take for you to get angry? Do you act out in a very quick, fast way without even thinking it through? Or are you very slow to your anger? Again, anger is not always a bad thing. God gets angry, but he gets angry about good things. And what I love about who God is that he gives me multiple chances. He gives a lot of time for people to change. It says this in Proverbs. Now, if you don't know Proverbs, this is the book of wisdom. If you want to get wise, read Proverbs. In Proverbs chapter 14, the author says this: whoever is slow to anger, remember, hey, there's that phrase again, slow to anger. Whoever is long of nose, whoever is slow to anger has great understanding. Another way of saying that, whoever is slow in their anger understands who God is, his character. They understand that if I'm slow to anger, I understand I'm that way because God is slow to anger. And I want to be more like Jesus. So whoever is slow to anger has great understanding. But he who has a hasty, another way of saying that is quick, very quick, who has a hasty temper exalts, another way of saying that is shows folly. Folly just means foolishness. Hey, whoever has a quick temper shows foolishness. I don't know about you. I don't want to be a fool. I want to be someone that lives a life that is pleasing to Jesus. I don't want to be very quick in my anger. I don't want to be a fool. I don't like being a fool. I'm sure you don't like being a fool. But someone that is slow in their anger is understanding of who Jesus is and what he has called you to be like. Big picture is this: the monster of anger can quickly become a good thing if we are slow to become angry. So if someone upsets you, I want to encourage you to try this action step. Your last fill-in is this: when someone makes you angry, show them patience by giving them a second chance. I'm going to invite the band on up. But again, when someone makes you angry, show them patience by giving them a second chance. As we learned today, God is slow in his anger. It takes a lot for him to be upset. He's very slow. He gives you and me, what I love, he gives us multiple chances to show more of who he is through our actions, how we talk to one another. So I just want you to think for a moment, just to yourself, how do you handle anger? Are you very quick? Do you act out in your anger? Ladies in the front. How do you act when you become angry? Are you very slow? Or are you patient with someone, with your parents, your siblings, your friends, your teacher? Man, there have been times in my life where I'm like, this teacher just, man, they gotta go. They are frustrating. Are you slow in your anger? Are you patient with them? Are you giving them multiple chances? So again, when someone makes you angry, show them patience by giving them a second chance. I'm going to invite you guys to stand on up where you are at. We're going to go into this last song of worship. And I want you just to think about it. As we go into this last song, I want you to think to yourself, hey, am I slow in my anger? Funny enough, do you have a long nose? Does it take a lot for you to get upset? Or are you very quick when you get upset? So as we go into this last song, I want us to think about that. Let's go ahead and pray. Jesus, thank you so much that you are patient with us, that you are slow in your anger. You're not quick. You're not fast in your anger. You are very slow. And I'm grateful, Jesus, because I mess up constantly. I'm not perfect. No one in this room is perfect. The only perfect person, the only perfect being ever is you. And you're slow in your anger. So as we go into this last song, Jesus, would you help us understand what that looks like for us? As we go into this Sunday, as we go into this week, would you help us understand that when we get angry, when we get frustrated, when we get upset, would you help us and remind us that you are slow in your anger? And as followers of you, we should be like you, which means we should be slow as well. We give this time to you, and it's in your name. Amen.